Jake Morrison stood at the viewing window of the ship Harmony's Edge, watching the alien world grow larger on the screen. The planet looked strange with its purple sky and 3 moons hanging in space like jewels. He had been Earth's top diplomat for 20 years, but this was different. This was humanity's first real meeting with the Zethran Confederation. "Nervous, Ambassador?" Captain Lisa Martinez asked as she walked up beside him. She was a small woman with dark hair tied back in a neat bun. Her uniform was crisp and clean, but Jake could see the worry in her brown eyes. "Not nervous," Jake said, adjusting his formal diplomatic suit. "Just thinking about what this means for our people." He was 55 years old with gray hair at his temples and lines around his blue eyes that spoke of years spent solving problems between nations on Earth. Dr. Nathan Cross joined them at the window. He was younger than both of them, maybe 35, with thick glasses and messy blonde hair. "The cultural files are ready, Ambassador. I've studied their language and customs for 2 years. The Zethrans are very old, maybe 10,000 years older than human civilization. They believe strongly in hierarchy and order." Jake nodded. The Zethrans controlled this part of the galaxy. Their empire stretched across 50 star systems. Human ships had been traveling through their space for months, always careful to avoid conflict. The Zethrans had finally agreed to this meeting, after humanity sent dozens of messages requesting formal contact. "Remember," Dr. Cross continued, "they see themselves as the natural rulers of this region. They have a caste system where different types of their species have different jobs. The warrior caste protects them, the worker caste builds their cities, and the ruler caste makes all the decisions. And they think other species should follow their rules too," Captain Martinez added. She had read the same reports. The Zethrans had contact with many alien races, but they treated most of them like children who needed guidance. Jake looked at the small box he carried. Inside were gifts from Earth, samples of human art, music recordings, scientific discoveries, and proposals for trade agreements. He hoped these would show the Zethrans that humans were worth treating as equals. "Communications coming in from the surface," called Communications Officer Amy Torres from her station. She was young, maybe 28, with short black hair and quick fingers that danced over her controls. "They're giving us permission to land at the capital city." "Take us down, Captain," Jake said. The ship descended through the purple atmosphere. Through the windows they could see the Zethran capital city. It was massive, with tall crystal towers that caught the light from the alien sun. The buildings looked like they had been grown rather than built, with smooth curves and no sharp edges. "Look at the size of those structures," Dr. Cross whispered. "Some of those towers must be 3 miles high." They landed at a designated area near the city center. The landing pad was made of the same crystal material as the buildings, and it glowed with a soft blue light. As they prepared to leave the ship, Jake gathered his small team. Besides Dr. Cross, he brought Security Chief Ryan Blake and Amy Torres to handle communications. Ryan Blake was a big man with broad shoulders and careful eyes. He had served in Earth's military before joining the diplomatic corps. His job was to keep Jake safe, but they all knew that if the Zethrans wanted to hurt them, there was little he could do on their home planet. "Remember," Jake told his team, "we're here to make friends. We want safe passage through their space and maybe some trade agreements. Nothing more complicated than that." They stepped off the ship onto the crystal landing pad. The air was thin but breathable. The gravity was lighter than Earth's, making each step feel strange. Waiting for them were 3 Zethran escorts. Jake had seen pictures, but meeting them in person was still shocking. The Zethrans were tall, maybe 8 feet high, with bodies that looked like a cross between insects and crystals. Their skin was hard and shiny, changing colors in the light. They had 4 arms and moved with quick, jerky motions. Their faces were alien, with large compound eyes and mouth parts that clicked when they spoke. "Welcome, humans," the lead Zethran said in heavily accented English. "I am Commander Veltar of the escort caste. You will follow me to the High Council chambers." They walked through the crystal corridors of the government building. Everything was huge, built for beings much larger than humans. The walls showed moving pictures of Zethran history. Their early civilization, their expansion into space, their meetings with other alien species. "How many other species do you have contact with?" Dr. Cross asked as they walked. "Many," Commander Veltar replied. "The Krellin miners work our asteroid fields. The Vorthan farmers grow food on our colony worlds. The Nexari serve as translators and record keepers. All find purpose under Zethran guidance. Jake noticed that the Zethran never mentioned these other species as equals or partners. They were always described as working for the Zethrans, not with them. The High Council chambers were enormous. The ceiling was so high it disappeared into shadows. Around the room sat dozens of Zethrans, all larger and more decorated than Commander Veltar. At the center, on a raised platform, sat the biggest Zethran Jake had ever seen. Supreme Overlord Kethvar, Commander Veltar announced, I present the human diplomatic mission. Kethvar was massive, maybe 10 feet tall, with crystal growths covering his head like a crown. His eyes were deep red, and when he spoke, his voice echoed through the chamber. So, Kethvar said slowly, these are the humans we have heard about. Small creatures from a young world seeking our attention. He looked down at them like a giant studying insects. You have traveled far to reach us. What do you want? Jake stepped forward, feeling very small in the huge chamber, but he kept his voice steady and strong. Your Magnificence, I am Ambassador Jake Morrison, representing Earth and all human colonies. We come in peace, hoping to establish formal diplomatic relations between our peoples. He opened his gift box and began to explain each item. The artwork that showed human creativity, the music that demonstrated their culture, the scientific papers that proved their intelligence. The Zethran Council listened in silence. Some clicked their mouthparts in what might have been amusement. Others seemed bored. Supreme Overlord Kethvar watched everything with those red eyes, showing no emotion at all. When Jake finished his presentation, the chamber was quiet for a long moment. Then Kethvar spoke again. Interesting, he said, but primitive. We have seen such things before from young species. He leaned forward on his throne. Tell me, small human, what makes you think your kind deserves to be treated as equals to the Zethran Confederation? Jake Morrison felt the weight of every eye in the chamber watching him. The question hung in the air like a challenge. He had prepared for this moment during the long journey to Zethran space, but standing here under the red gaze of Supreme Overlord Kethvar made everything feel different. Your Magnificence, Jake began, keeping his voice calm and respectful. We believe that intelligence and consciousness, not age or size, determine the worth of a species. Humans may be young compared to the Zethrans, but we have proven ourselves capable of space travel, scientific advancement, and peaceful cooperation. Some of the Zethran Council members clicked their mouthparts in what sounded like laughter. Kethvar raised one of his forearms and the chamber fell silent. Capability, Kethvar repeated slowly. Yes, we have observed your ships in our space. Small vessels, simple designs. You can travel between stars, this is true. But so can the Vorten farmers and the Krellin miners. This does not make them our equals. Dr. Cross shifted nervously beside Jake. Amy Torres kept her recording equipment running, documenting everything for Earth. Ryan Blake stood perfectly still, but Jake could sense his tension. Perhaps, Jake said carefully, we could discuss specific areas of cooperation. Human scientists have made advances in medical technology that might interest your people. Our engineers have developed new methods of space travel that could benefit both our civilizations. Kethvar stood up from his throne. Even at this distance, his massive form towered over the human delegation. You speak of benefits to us, little human. But what do you offer that we do not already possess? What knowledge could a species barely capable of leaving its home system provide to those who have ruled the stars for millennia? Jake opened his mouth to respond, but Kethvar continued. We have watched your kind for months as you crept through our territory, always asking permission, always careful not to offend. This shows wisdom but also weakness. Strong species take what they need. Weak species beg for scraps. The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop. Jake could feel the mood changing. What had started as a formal diplomatic meeting was becoming something else entirely. We prefer negotiation to conflict, Jake said firmly. That doesn't make us weak. It makes us civilized. Several Zethrans in the chamber made harsh clicking sounds. Commander Veltar, who had escorted them here, took a step back from the human delegation. Kethvar descended from his platform, moving with surprising grace for such a large being. His crystal skin caught the light, making him look like a living gemstone. As he approached, Jake had to tilt his head back to meet his eyes. Civilized, Kethvar mused. An interesting word. In our experience, young species often mistake submission for civilization. They confuse fear with wisdom. With respect, Your Magnificence, Jake said, standing his ground. Humanity has not survived and thrived by being weak. We've faced challenges that would have destroyed lesser species. We've overcome wars, disasters, and the vast emptiness of space itself. We're here not as beggars, but as potential partners. The chamber erupted in clicking and chittering from the Zethran Council. Kethvar's red eyes seemed to glow brighter. "Partners," he said, his voice getting louder. "You dare to suggest partnership with the Zethran Confederation? You, whose entire species could fit on one of our colony worlds." Jake felt his diplomatic training kicking in. De-escalate, find common ground, look for solutions. But something in Kethvar's tone warned him that this was moving beyond normal negotiation. "Yes," Jake said simply. "Partners. Each species brings different strengths. Humans excel at adaptation, innovation, and cooperation. We've learned that diversity makes everyone stronger." "Diversity," Kethvar spat. "The refuge of the weak. The strong impose order. The strong create hierarchy. The strong decide who lives and who dies." Dr. Cross grabbed Jake's arm. "Ambassador," he whispered urgently, "I think we should consider requesting a recess." But Kethvar had heard. "Your advisor shows wisdom, human. Perhaps you should listen to him." "I appreciate the suggestion," Jake said, not backing down, "but I believe we can work through any misunderstandings. Humanity has come here in good faith seeking peaceful relations. We're prepared to be patient and work toward mutual understanding." Kethvar was now close enough that Jake could see his reflection in the alien's crystal skin. The Supreme Overlord's mouthparts were moving rapidly, making sounds that the translation device couldn't interpret. "You speak of patience," Kethvar said slowly, "of mutual understanding, but you refuse to understand your place. You refuse to accept the natural order." "What natural order?" Jake asked. "The order where the strong rule the weak, where ancient wisdom guides young foolishness, where the Zethran Confederation decides the fate of all species in this region of space." Jake felt the moment slipping away from him. 20 years of diplomatic experience told him to find a way to salvage the situation, to offer compromises, to buy time. But looking into Kethvar's red eyes, he saw something that made his blood run cold. This wasn't about territory or trade agreements. This was about something much more fundamental. "I understand your position," Jake said carefully, "but I cannot accept it. Humanity will not be anyone's vassal. We're prepared to coexist peacefully, but we will not submit to rule by others." The chamber fell completely silent. Even the background humming of the building system seemed to stop. Kethvar's forearms spread wide and his crystal crown caught the light like fire. "Cannot accept," he repeated. "Will not submit." His voice was growing louder with each word. "You come to our world, stand in our sacred chamber, and refuse the generous offer of protection and guidance we extend to all worthy species." "We're grateful for the offer," Jake said, "but we must respectfully decline. Humanity chooses its own path." Ryan Blake stepped forward, his hand moving toward his sidearm. Amy Torres looked ready to run. Dr. Cross was pale and sweating. Kethvar raised himself to his full height. "Then you have chosen poorly, Ambassador Morrison of Earth." The Supreme Overlord's eyes began to glow with an inner light. Jake felt something pressing against his mind, like invisible hands trying to squeeze his skull. The other humans gasped as they felt it too. "This is how the Zethran Confederation deals with those who refuse our generous offer of guidance," Kethvar said. The pressure in Jake's head was getting stronger, making it hard to think. "Stop," Jake managed to say. "This is a diplomatic mission. We're protected by—" "You are protected by nothing here," Kethvar interrupted. "You are insects who have forgotten their place." The pressure became unbearable. Jake fell to his knees, clutching his head. Through the pain, he could hear Amy screaming, Dr. Cross calling his name, and Ryan shouting something about weapons. Jake looked up one last time at the towering figure of Kethvar. Even through the agony, he managed to speak. This won't end well for you," he gasped. "My people. They won't forget this." Kethvar's mouth parts curved in what might have been a smile. "Your people will learn to obey, or they will share your fate." The pressure in Jake's head reached a crescendo. He felt something snap inside his mind, and then everything went dark. When the light faded from Kethvar's eyes, Ambassador Jake Morrison lay motionless on the crystal floor of the High Council chamber. The other humans rushed to his side, but Dr. Cross quickly confirmed what everyone already knew. "He's dead," Cross whispered, his voice breaking. Kethvar returned to his throne as if nothing had happened. "Remove the body," he ordered. "Keep the others alive." They will carry our message back to their people. Ryan Blake knelt beside his fallen ambassador, his face twisted with grief and rage. Amy Torres was crying as she tried to establish communication with their ship. Dr. Cross just stared at Jake's still form, unable to process what had just happened. Your Earth has 72 of your hours to submit, Kethvar announced. Accept vassal status under the Zethran Confederation, or face the same cleansing that awaits all who challenge the natural order. As Zethran guards surrounded the surviving humans, none of them noticed Amy Torres's small communication device had managed to send one brief, encrypted message to the Harmony's edge before being detected and destroyed. The message contained only 2 words: Jake down. The emergency message reached Earth 17 hours after Ambassador Morrison's death. President Helen Carter was in a meeting with the Agricultural Council when her aide burst through the doors, his face white with shock. "Madam President," he said, struggling to keep his voice steady, "we've received an urgent communication from the Zethran system. Ambassador Morrison is dead." The room fell silent. President Carter, a woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and sharp green eyes, stood up slowly. She had known Jake Morrison for 15 years, had trusted him with humanity's most important diplomatic missions. "How?" she asked simply. "Murdered, ma'am, during the diplomatic meeting. The Zethrans have given us an ultimatum: submit to vassal status or face what they call cleansing." Within 2 hours, the Global Defense Council was in emergency session. The meeting took place in the secure bunkers beneath Geneva, in a room that most people on Earth didn't know existed. Around the table sat the most powerful military leaders in human space. Fleet Admiral Greg Stone was a tall man with graying hair and scars on his hands from his days as a fighter pilot. He had been expecting this call for 20 years. General Patricia Wells sat across from him, her uniform crisp despite being awakened at 3 in the morning. She commanded Earth's ground forces and the Marine unit stationed throughout human space. "Tell me everything," President Carter said as she took her seat at the head of the table. Admiral Stone activated the holographic display. It showed the Zethran Confederation's territory in red, human space in blue, and the scattered colonies that lay between them. "The Zethrans control 47 star systems," Stone began. "Their military consists of approximately 8,000 warships of various classes. They have subjugated dozens of species over the past 3 millennia. What about their ultimatum?" Carter asked. 72 hours to accept vassal status," General Wells replied. "Our intelligence suggests they mean complete submission. Our colonies would become their territory. Our ships would serve their fleet, our people would work for their empire." President Carter studied the display. "What are our options?" Admiral Stone and General Wells exchanged glances. This was the moment they had been preparing for since humanity first encountered alien life. "Madam President," Stone said carefully, "there are things about our military capabilities that have been classified at the highest levels. Things that even some members of this council don't know about." Carter nodded. "I'm aware of the Black Projects, Admiral. This seems like the time to discuss them openly." Stone pressed a series of buttons on his control panel. The holographic display changed, showing not just known human territory, but dozens of additional points scattered throughout the galaxy. "For the past 30 years, Stone explained, we've been implementing what we call the Quiet Expansion Protocol. While our official colony ships establish the worlds everyone knows about, we've also been secretly building hidden bases, weapon platforms, and shipyards." General Wells pointed to various locations on the map. "Every time we sent out a peaceful exploration mission, we also sent covert teams to establish military positions. We've been assuming that eventually we'd encounter a hostile alien force." "How many ships?" Carter asked. "Our public fleet number's about 400 vessels," Stone replied. "Our actual military capability is closer to 3,000 ships, with another 1,000 under construction in hidden shipyards." The room was quiet as the implications sank in. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, Earth's leading weapons scientist, activated her own display. "The technological gap isn't what the Zethrans think it is," she said. Dr. Hayes was a small woman with blonde hair and intense blue eyes. She had spent her career developing weapons that she hoped would never be used. "Our public ships are deliberately designed to appear simple and primitive. Our actual warships incorporate technology that's, well, let's just say we've been busy." "Show me," Carter said. Dr. Hayes brought up technical specifications. Quantum manipulation drives that can phase ships partially out of normal space. Adaptive armor that learns from each hit and becomes stronger. Weapons that can alter local reality to ignore enemy defenses. Admiral Stone continued the briefing. We've also been monitoring every alien species we've encountered. We know more about Zethran military capabilities than they know about ours. They're overconfident because they've never faced serious resistance. What about our people on the Zethran homeworld? Carter asked. We're already working on that, General Wells replied. Captain Kevin Ross is currently in Zethran space aboard the stealth ship Retribution. Commander Susan Price is leading a rescue mission for the survivors. Carter stood up and walked to the display. She studied the red zone that represented Zethran space, then looked at the hidden human position surrounding it. How long have you been planning for this scenario? She asked. Since first contact protocols were established, Stone admitted. We hoped it would never be necessary, but we've been preparing for the possibility that we'd encounter a species that couldn't coexist peacefully with humanity. And you think we can win? Ma'am, General Wells said firmly, the Zethrans made a fatal error. They assumed that because we appeared peaceful and diplomatic, we were weak. They've never seen what humans are capable of when we're truly threatened. Carter returned to her seat. What do you recommend? We let the 72-hour deadline pass, Stone said. When they attack our colonies expecting easy victories, they'll discover what our ships can really do. Meanwhile, we activate all hidden assets and begin systematic strikes against their infrastructure. How many casualties are we looking at? Dr. Hayes answered. On their side? Potentially catastrophic. They've never faced weapons like ours. On our side, if we execute the plan correctly, minimal losses. You're talking about war, Carter said quietly. No, ma'am, Admiral Stone replied. They started the war when they murdered Ambassador Morrison. We're talking about ending it. Carter was quiet for a long moment, thinking about Jake Morrison, about the message he had tried to deliver, about the choice the Zethrans had forced upon humanity. There's something else, Dr. Hayes said. The Zethrans rule through fear and overwhelming force, but they've never faced an opponent who could match their technology and exceed their tactical flexibility. When their subject species see the Zethran fleet being defeated, many of them will likely rebel. Are you suggesting we're not just fighting the Zethrans, but liberating their empire? It's a distinct possibility, General Wells confirmed. Our intelligence indicates that most of the species under Zethran rule are there unwillingly. They might welcome liberation. Carter looked around the table at the faces of humanity's military leadership. These were people who had spent their careers preparing for a war they hoped would never come. Now that it was here, they seemed almost relieved. What about the other alien species we've encountered? She asked. The peaceful ones? We've already begun diplomatic outreach, Stone replied. Most of them have expressed support for our position. The Altarians have offered to provide safe harbor for non-combatant ships. The Proxima Federation has indicated they might provide logistical support. So we're not alone in this. No, ma'am. It appears the Zethrans have been making enemies for a long time. We're just the first species with the capability to do something about it. Carter stood up again. Admiral Stone, activate all hidden assets. General Wells, prepare our forces for immediate deployment. Dr. Hayes, I want every weapon system we have online and ready. What about the ultimatum? Stone asked. We'll send them an answer, Carter said grimly, but not the one they're expecting. As the meeting broke up, Carter remained behind with Admiral Stone. Greg, she said quietly, using his first name for the first time in years. Are you certain we can win this? Stone was quiet for a moment. Ma'am, the Zethrans made two critical mistakes. First, they assumed we were weak, because we chose diplomacy over aggression. Second, they killed Jake Morrison. Why is that second one a mistake? Because Jake was our olive branch, Stone replied. He represented our desire for peace. When they killed him, they eliminated the one thing standing between them and what we really are. And what are we really, Admiral? Stone's expression was grim. We're the species that survived ice ages, world wars, plagues, and the void of space itself. We're the species that turned nuclear weapons into power plants and chemical weapons into medicine. We're adaptable, innovative, and when we're threatened, we're absolutely ruthless. Carter nodded slowly. Send the message to all human ships and colonies. Tell them what happened to Jake. Tell them what the Zethrans demanded. And tell them that in 60 hours, we're going to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten humanity. As Admiral Stone left to carry out his orders, Carter remained alone in the bunker, looking at the display showing Zethran space. Somewhere in that red zone, Jake Morrison's body lay cold on an alien world. But his death would not be in vain. The Zethrans had wanted to see what humanity really was. They were about to find out. The 72-hour deadline passed without a response from Earth. Supreme Overlord Kethvar ordered the immediate attack on human colonies, confident that the small, primitive species would quickly surrender once they witnessed Zethran military might. The first target was the human colony at Kepler 442b, a farming world with a population of 2 million. 3 Zethran battle fleets, totaling nearly 400 ships, entered the system expecting to find frightened civilians and perhaps a few patrol vessels. Instead, they found Captain Sandra Wells waiting for them. Captain Wells commanded the human battleship Devastator, but to Zethran sensors it looked like just another primitive human vessel. The Zethrans had seen ships like it before during their observation of human space. Simple designs, basic weapons, nothing that could threaten their advanced warships. Unknown human vessel, came the transmission from the lead Zethran ship. You are in violation of Confederation space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Captain Wells, a woman with short brown hair and cold gray eyes, smiled grimly. She had been waiting for this moment for 5 years, ever since taking command of one of humanity's most advanced warships. This is Captain Sandra Wells of the Human Defense Force. She replied. You are attacking a peaceful colony. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The Zethran response was immediate. Energy beams lanced out from a dozen ships, weapons that had destroyed countless alien vessels over the centuries. The beams struck the Devastator directly and did absolutely nothing. The human ship's adaptive shielding absorbed the energy, analyzed it, and instantly reconfigured itself to be immune to that type of weapon. What the Zethrans didn't know was that humanity had been studying samples of Zethran technology for months, preparing for exactly this scenario. Our turn, Captain Wells said calmly. The Devastator returned fire with weapons the Zethrans had never seen before. Quantum torpedoes that phased through their shields as if they didn't exist. Energy beams that adapted to overcome any defense. Reality-warping missiles that ignored the normal laws of physics. Within minutes, 6 Zethran ships were destroyed, their crews never understanding what had killed them. But Captain Wells wasn't alone. As the Zethran fleet reeled from the unexpected resistance, more human ships appeared throughout the system. They didn't come from hyperspace or wormholes. They simply phased into normal reality from hidden dimensions where they had been waiting. All ships, Captain Wells broadcast, execute Protocol 7. Show them what we really are. The battle that followed lasted only 40 minutes. When it ended, the Zethran attack fleet was completely destroyed. Not a single human ship was seriously damaged. Similar scenes played out across human space. At the colony world of New Boston, Commander Angela Foster led a defense that turned a Zethran siege fleet into scrap metal. At the mining station on Vega Prime, Captain Robert Chen's squadron demonstrated new fighters that could survive inside a star and emerge to attack from impossible angles. The Zethrans had expected easy victories against primitive humans. Instead, they found themselves facing technology that seemed like magic. Back on Dominion Prime, Supreme Overlord Kethvar received the first reports with disbelief. This cannot be accurate, he told his military advisors. These are the same humans we observed for months. Small ships, simple weapons, primitive technology. The reports are confirmed, Supreme Overlord, replied General Zaxron, his primary military commander. Our fleets are being destroyed. The humans appear to have been hiding their true capabilities. Impossible, Kethvar snarled. They are weak. We saw their ships. We studied their technology. Perhaps, suggested another advisor carefully. They allowed us to see only what they wanted us to see. The reality was even worse than the Zethrans feared. As news of the human victories spread throughout the Confederation, something unexpected began to happen. The subject species that the Zethrans had ruled for centuries started to rebel. On the mining world of Kreltar, the enslaved Krellin workers rose up against their Zethran overseers. They had been waiting for a sign that the Confederation could be defeated, and the human victories provided exactly that sign. Similar uprisings erupted across Zethran space. The Vorthan farmers stopped sending food to Zethran worlds. The Nixari translators began broadcasting human propaganda instead of Zethran orders. Dozens of species that had been forced into servitude saw their chance for freedom. Meanwhile, deep in Zethran territory, Sergeant Tony Davis was leading the most dangerous mission of his career. Davis was a Special Forces operative with 10 years of experience in hostile environments. He had volunteered to infiltrate Dominion Prime and rescue the surviving members of the diplomatic mission. Davis and his team had been inserted by the stealth ship Retribution, which had spent weeks studying Zethran defenses. What they found was both encouraging and disturbing. The Zethrans were so confident in their superiority that their security was surprisingly weak. They simply couldn't imagine that any other species would dare to attack their homeworld. "Target building is 2 clicks ahead," Davis whispered into his communicator. His team consisted of 6 specialists, all equipped with advanced stealth suits that bent light around them. To Zethran sensors, they were invisible. The building where the humans were being held was a typical Zethran structure, tall, crystalline, and heavily fortified. But the fortifications were designed to keep people in, not to keep trained human soldiers out. "Guard patrol coming," warned Corporal Lisa Kim, the team's sniper. 4 Zethrans, standard equipment. Davis and his team waited in the shadows as the alien guards passed. The Zethrans moved with the confidence of beings who had never been seriously threatened. That confidence was about to cost them. "Move," Davis ordered. The team infiltrated the building using techniques that would have been impossible for most species. They could climb vertical walls, squeeze through impossibly small spaces, and move in complete silence. Within an hour, they had reached the detention level. They found Ryan Blake, Amy Torres, and Dr. Nathan Cross in separate cells, all of them alive but showing signs of interrogation. The Zethrans had been trying to extract information about human military capabilities. "Blake," Davis whispered as he approached the security chief's cell. "Can you hear me?" Blake looked up, his face bruised but his eyes alert. "Davis, how the hell did you get here?" "Long story. We're getting you out." Davis attached a small device to the crystal bars of the cell. The device emitted a focused energy beam that sliced through the alien material like butter. "What about the ambassador?" Blake asked as he stumbled out of the cell. Davis's expression was grim. "We know what happened." "I'm sorry." As they freed Amy Torres and Dr. Cross, Davis explained the situation. "The war's started. Our people are winning. The Zethran fleets are being destroyed faster than they can deploy them." "Winning?" Dr. Cross asked in disbelief. "But their technology isn't as advanced as they thought," Davis replied. "And ours is more advanced than we let them believe." As they made their way out of the building, they could hear alarms beginning to sound throughout the city. News of the human victories was reaching Dominion Prime, and the Zethran leadership was starting to panic. "Extraction point is 3 clicks south," Davis told his team. "Stay together and stay quiet." But as they moved through the crystal corridors, Dr. Cross grabbed Davis's arm. "Wait," he said urgently. "Before we leave, there's something you need to know. During the interrogations, I learned about their computer systems. I think I can access their military databases." Davis looked at him skeptically. "That's not the mission, Doc. It could end the war faster," Cross insisted. "If we can get information about their remaining fleets, their defensive positions, their subject species, it could save lives." Davis considered for a moment, then nodded. "You have 5 minutes." Dr. Cross hurried to a nearby computer terminal. His fingers moved quickly over the alien interface using knowledge he had gained during months of studying Zethran technology. "Got it," he whispered after a few tense minutes. "Fleet positions, defensive plans, and—" "Oh my God, what?" "Lists of every species under Zethran control. Populations, locations, everything. There are over 60 intelligent species in their empire, and most of them are slaves." Davis downloaded the information to his portable storage device. "This changes everything. Command needs to see this immediately." As they finally escaped the building and made their way to the extraction point, alarms were sounding throughout the capital city. Zethran ships were launching from orbital stations, not to attack human positions, but to suppress the growing rebellions on their own worlds. Supreme Overlord Kethvar stood in his council chamber, watching reports of defeat after defeat. His empire, built over 3 millennia, was collapsing in a matter of days. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his advisors. "They are primitives. We are the superior species." "Perhaps," one brave advisor suggested, "we underestimated them." Kethvar's eyes blazed with fury. "Contact the human leadership. Demand negotiations. We will offer them favorable terms if they cease this attack. But even as he spoke, Kethvar knew it was too late. The humans had shown their true nature, and it was nothing like what the Zethrans had expected. They weren't primitives seeking guidance. They were apex. 6 months after the murder of Ambassador Jake Morrison, the Zethran Confederation was dying. What had once been a mighty empire spanning 47 star systems was now reduced to a handful of worlds desperately trying to maintain control over their remaining territory. Fleet Admiral Greg Stone stood on the bridge of the human flagship Retribution's Edge, watching the final approach to Dominion Prime. Around him, the largest fleet in human history moved through space like a vast mechanical organism. 300 of humanity's most advanced warships, supported by vessels from a dozen newly liberated species, converged on the Zethran homeworld. Admiral, reported Captain Sandra Wells, who had been promoted after her victory at Kepler 442. Long-range sensors show minimal orbital defenses. Most of their fleet has been recalled to defend the inner worlds. Stone nodded grimly. The Zethrans were making their last stand exactly where he had expected, at the heart of their empire, in the system where they had ruled unchallenged for 3,000 years. What's the status of the liberation fleets? Stone asked. Colonel Martinez reports successful operations in the Outer Rim, Wells replied. 31 species have been freed from Zethran control. Most are requesting to join the alliance against their former oppressors. The transformation had been remarkable. As human forces systematically dismantled Zethran military installations, the enslaved species throughout their empire had risen in coordinated rebellions. The Krellans, with their knowledge of mining operations, had sabotaged the asteroid facilities that supplied raw materials to Zethran shipyards. The Vorthan agricultural specialists had cut off food supplies to Zethran military bases. The Nexari, with their advanced communication abilities, had coordinated resistance movements across dozens of worlds. "Sir," called Lieutenant Amy Torres from her communication station. She had been rescued from Dominion Prime and had requested to serve in the final assault. "Incoming transmission from the Zethran leadership." "Put it through," Stone ordered. The main screen flickered, showing the familiar form of Supreme Overlord Kethvar. But the mighty ruler looked very different now. His crystal crown was cracked, his posture showed exhaustion, and his red eyes held something Stone had never expected to see in a Zethran: fear. "Admiral Stone," Kethvar began, his voice lacking its former authority. "I request immediate negotiations for a ceasefire." Stone studied the alien leader who had murdered his friend. "I'm listening." "The Confederation is prepared to offer significant concessions," Kethvar continued. "We will withdraw from all disputed territories. We will grant independence to any species that desires it. We ask only for the preservation of the core Zethran worlds." "Interesting," Stone replied calmly. "And what makes you think we're interested in negotiations?" Kethavar's eyes flashed with something like his old arrogance. "Because you are civilized beings. You understand that total destruction serves no purpose. There must be some accommodation that—" "You killed our ambassador," Stone interrupted. "During a peaceful diplomatic mission, you threatened to exterminate our entire species. You've enslaved dozens of intelligent races for centuries." His voice remained perfectly calm, but everyone on the bridge could hear the ice beneath it. "Explain to me why we should show you mercy that you've never shown others." The Zethran ruler was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because without mercy we are all merely monsters." "You're absolutely right," Stone agreed. "The difference is we remember that. You forgot it a long time ago." Stone cut the transmission and turned to his fleet commanders. "Begin the final assault. All ships execute Operation Morrison." The battle for Dominion Prime was unlike anything in galactic history. The Zethrans threw everything they had left at the approaching human fleet. Ancient weapons that could crack planets, reality-distorting devices that had been forbidden by galactic treaties, experimental technologies that barely worked and killed as many of their own ships as enemy vessels. None of it mattered. The human fleet moved with a precision that spoke of months of planning and years of preparation. Their ships phased in and out of normal space, making targeting impossible. Their weapons adapted to every defense the Zethrans deployed. Their fighters moved through the battle like living things, responding to threats before the Zethrans could even detect them. Captain Robert Chen, commanding the assault carrier Eagle's Fury, watched his fighter squadrons weave through the Zethran defenses. "It's almost beautiful," he commented to his tactical officer. "Like watching a dance of death," the officer replied. "Yes," Chen agreed. But they chose the music. On the surface of Dominion Prime, Dr. Nathan Cross watched the battle from the window of a Zethran government building. He had returned to the planet as part of the Liberation Force, carrying a message from Earth to any Zethrans willing to listen. Beside him stood Ryan Blake, now a colonel in the Human Marines. Both men were thinking about their fallen friend, Ambassador Morrison, whose body lay in a crystal tomb not far from where they stood. "Do you think this is what Jake would have wanted?" Cross asked quietly. Blake was quiet for a moment, watching human ships sweep aside the last of the Zethran orbital defenses. "Jake wanted peace," he said finally. "But he also believed that some things were worth fighting for: freedom, dignity, the right to choose your own path." "The right to say no," Cross added, remembering Morrison's final words to Kethvar. The door to the chamber burst open, and Zethran guards entered, their weapons drawn. Behind them came Kethvar himself, no longer the confident ruler but a desperate being fighting for survival. "You," Kethvar snarled, pointing at Cross and Blake. "This is your fault. Your species has destroyed everything we built." "Everything you stole," Blake corrected calmly. Kethvar raised his weapon, the same type of energy projector he had used to kill Ambassador Morrison. But before he could fire, the building shook as human ground forces breached the outer defenses. "It's over," Cross said simply. "Your empire is finished. Your fleets are destroyed. Your subject species are free. The only question now is whether you choose to surrender with dignity or die fighting for something that's already lost." Through the crystal walls, they could see human dropships landing throughout the capital city. Not just human soldiers emerged, but members of dozens of liberated species, come to witness the end of their oppression. Kethvar looked around the chamber where he had ruled for decades, where he had murdered a peaceful ambassador, where he had made the decision that doomed his entire civilization. "We were strong," he said, his voice breaking. "We were the superior species. How could primitives defeat us?" Admiral Stone's voice came through the building's communication system as human forces took control. "This is Admiral Stone to all Zethran military personnel. Lay down your weapons and surrender. You will be treated according to the laws of war. Resistance is futile." Blake stepped toward Kethvar, his own weapon drawn but not aimed at the Zethran leader. "You want to know how we defeated you? It wasn't because we were stronger or smarter or more advanced. It's because you made one fundamental error." "What error?" Kethvar demanded. "You confused diplomacy with weakness," Blake replied. "Ambassador Morrison came here offering friendship, cooperation, mutual respect. When you killed him, you eliminated the one thing standing between you and what humanity really is when we're threatened." The building shook again as the final Zethran resistance collapsed. Through the windows, they could see human and allied flags being raised over government buildings throughout the capital. "And what are you really?" Kethvar asked, his voice hollow. Blake looked out at the liberated city, thinking of all the species that would now be free to choose their own destiny. "We're the species that survived ice ages and asteroid impacts. We're the species that turned our most destructive weapons into tools for peace and exploration. We're the species that learned that strength isn't about dominating others. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves." Kethvar dropped his weapon. "I killed your ambassador." "Yes," Blake agreed. "And now you'll face justice for that. But not our justice, the justice of every species you've oppressed. They'll decide your fate." Hours later, Admiral Stone stood in the same council chamber where Ambassador Morrison had died. The crystal throne was empty, its occupant now in custody awaiting trial. Around the chamber, representatives from dozens of formerly enslaved species gathered to witness the end of an era. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes approached Stone, carrying a small device. "The memorial is ready, Admiral." Stone nodded and followed her to a small alcove that had been prepared near the spot where Jake Morrison fell. A simple plaque made from earth granite bore an inscription: "Ambassador Jake Morrison, Earth's representative to the stars. His death was their mistake. Our response was their education." "He would have hated this war," Stone said quietly. "Yes," Dr. Hayes agreed. "But he would have understood it. And he would have been proud that it ended with liberation, not conquest." Stone looked around the chamber where so many momentous decisions had been made. What happens now? Now we rebuild, came a voice from behind them. They turned to see President Carter, who had arrived for the ceremony marking the end of the war. We helped these species establish their own governments. We